Hey Jim, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Chris?
Good. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So for in the for obviously camp is starting. We have the rookie games coming up tonight. Obviously, we saw each other yesterday at rookie camp. Was there anything that you noticed from rookie camp yesterday? Is there anything that you're maybe looking forward to for Saturday? Since unfortunately tonight's game isn't streamed, but Saturdays is.
You know what? I don't like to put too much stock into this early part of camp, Chris. These
Hmm.
rookies are just basically getting their feet wet. I mean, if there was one theme, it wasn't necessarily from anything I saw on the ice. It was from what was said afterwards that
Okay.
everybody's in great shape and that guys that had to put some weight on, like
Yeah.
Zamula, for instance,
Hmm.
Igor Zamula is one guy who I think for sure had to add some strength. There are others it seemed to have done that. And as Ian LaPerriere said, these players did the work during the offseason.
Hmm.
And also mentioned that 40 players were here on September 1st. I mean, that's a lot. So
Yeah.
clearly, the year last year being disappointing, the looking forward to Camp Tortorella.
Yeah.
I think all of that has these guys on edge a little bit, but also
Yeah.
really looking forward to getting going. Rookies, veterans alike. So that's a good sign.
No, for sure, I agree. I mean, I think obviously you mentioned Azumola. I think after Ian LaPerriere came in and said that 2 years ago he was listed at 170, so that's 22 pounds in 2 years. I mean, that's huge. And I think Bill Meltzer had a tweet today saying that he was around 160 when they first got him.
He
So
was.
I mean, that's like what 32, 33 pounds, something like that. So that's huge. And he also mentioned Wyatt Wiley was another one. And again, I mean, it's not just rookies too. I mean, we've seen it from the guys, and the Flyers have tweeted it. The videos of Konechny and Sanheim and Hayes and all them guys just working out and getting physically fit for the year. I mean, because again, the Torts' camp is going to be hard, but kind of going off of that, when they hired Torts, what were your thoughts on that? Did you like the hire?
I did. And before I move on from the weight, I mean, putting weight on is not necessarily great for some players. I mean, for a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, if he were here, for instance, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like you'd be looking at his weight and wondering, he's got to put on weight. But
Right. Yeah.
for Igor Zamula, it's huge. He's a
Mhm.
defenseman who has outstanding puck moving abilities and game sense. But in terms of pushing and shoving along the wall or in front of the net, he was getting out muscled. So if he takes care of that part of his game, he can be a very solid NHL defenseman. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm really excited to see how he does this camp, how
Mhm.
he does as the year rolls along. And there are others. Morgan Frost put on a little weight last year. It showed, I think, and I think he needs to continue to get stronger. Noah Cates probably has to get a little stronger. So you get these players that add that muscle, you can really increase their role with the team. And suddenly fringe players become legitimate NHL players. As
Mhm.
for Tortorella, he's going to demand that. So they better put the weight
Yeah.
on if he expected them to, and they better be in shape when they get set to start camp next week because he's just not going to take it easy on anybody. Accountability is a big thing with John Tortorella. He will go through the wall for his players. He will defend his players to the max, especially from the media. But he will also demand that the players give him everything back. So it's a relationship that can get at times full of
Rocky.
emotion
Yeah.
because he does obviously show his emotion and he lets players know when he's not happy. But he also, in the long run, gets the respect of most of the players he coaches because he cares about them. He's a great human being deep down, and
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, we have relationships with some of our mentors or our parents, our father, and I can go back to my childhood, and I didn't. My father's my hero. I lost him when I was only 24 years old, but he
Right.
was the most important person in my life, and still
Mhm.
probably to this day is. And yet there were times I remember when I was a kid where I didn't really like my dad too much for the stuff he was doing. Discipline is tough sometimes, so you're not always going to have that player loving you at that moment, but you got to have their respect, and then eventually you've got to have their well-being at the heart of what you're doing. And John Tortorella does that. So I'm fascinated to see how
Mhm.
this all plays out this year because they do have some players on this team that are talented players that want to win, but they're kind of freelance players.
Right.
And, you're probably going to have to shove a little bit of that freelancing off to the side now and follow the system if you're going to get your ice time, if you're going to even stay in the lineup. So there will be, I think, some rocky moments, but I think in the long run, he will have this team whipped into some pretty good shape.
No, I agree with that for sure. I mean, I feel like, again, it's not going to be. I feel like it's not going to be the most. I guess you could say the easiest thing out of, starting out for the year. I feel like it's going to kind of take a little bit to get used to it, but kind of going off of that, um, are there any for you? Are there any like expectations that you have for the team this year? Because I mean, for me, I feel like the last handful of years I've tried to kind of have some sort of an expectation, but I feel like the safest bet for this year, since unfortunately they haven't been great the last 2 years, it's kind of safe to have no expectation. For you, do you yourself have any or no?
I mean, expectations, as you say, are they're sorted. The last 2 years, we had great expectations, right?
Yeah.
And not much happened. The year before that, which was the year that included the pause, we didn't really think that much. We were wondering about what effect Elaine Vigneault would have on this team. And that
Mhm.
team from mid-November to mid-March was the second best team in the NHL. So
Yeah.
expectations, I mean, it really doesn't mean much in any sport anymore, to be honest with you. It's good for ticket sales, I suppose, early
Yeah.
in the year. It's good for Twitterverse during the off season. It's good
Right.
for talk radio during the off season. But once the season starts, it's about what happens on the ice.
Right. Exactly.
I will say this: the Flyers. I mean, I've talked about this with you, Chris. I'm not sure whether I've done it on a podcast, but I have talked to you about how I see the whole evolution of the Flyers. Everyone talks about the Flyers because of their last 2 years. They should do a complete rebuild, tear it all
Right.
apart.
Yeah.
They did that already. They did that under Ron Hextall in the mid-teens through the end of the teens. And that was starting to come to fruition without Hexy because of other issues. But that those players were starting to mature in that 1920 season. And it looked like it was all coming together. And they made it to the second round of the playoffs in the bubble into the game 7. But a lot of those young players, those Konectys, Provorov, Sanheims, Carter Harts, were really starting to develop. The veteran core was still playing well. And so it looked like that rebuild was starting. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. They did all right in the bubble, but they came back from that. And it hasn't been the same since. And I can go through a ton of reasons, the biggest one being injuries, but there's others. They didn't have enough depth. And they had maybe Alain Vigneault lost his edge a little bit, I think, during the pandemic and some other things. But bottom line is it just fell apart. But
Yeah.
that same core minus Claude Giroux, and that's a huge minus Jake Voracek too. But I think they replaced him with a quality player in Cam Atkinson. So you take Giroux and you don't really replace him. So that's the wild card for me.
Yeah.
They have not replaced Claude. So, but outside of that, and it's a big thing to kind of just block out. But
Right.
this group now gets a chance with a head coach who's been through the wars, knows how to get his team and whip them into shape. This is their last chance, I would say, to show that rebuild was worth it.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't go well, I would think there might be a pretty good exodus of players come trade deadline or come into the offseason. Injuries or no, there's no excuses anymore.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is there is hope that can be, I think, rekindled some, and they've added some young players to the mix since your Cam Yorks, your Noah Cates, perhaps a Tyson Forster or some player of that ilk this year. So we'll see what Torts can do with it. They get a chance to show that they can be a competitive team, go for a playoff spot. And if it doesn't happen, then I think they need to really rethink things. If they had gotten Johnny Gaudreau, we might be taking the whole narrative might be different, right?
Right.
Because the
Exactly.
media overreacts to acquisitions of big players. Don't get me wrong. I wanted Johnny Gaudreau here.
Yeah.
I'm full disclosure biased on the subject. My son played for his coach in high school. I know the family. I know how much he wanted to play here. So I wanted Johnny Gaudreau here. But in terms of the expectations, which was your original question, if the Flyers had gotten Johnny Gaudreau, the expectations would be way higher than they
Yeah.
should be.
Even higher. Right.
And because they didn't get him, they're probably way lower than they should be. The expectation should be somewhere in between, and that's probably where the team will fall. We shall see.
No, for sure. I think that's a great answer. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on, obviously, what they did for agency day. It felt like everybody's mood went from here to here. When
Well,
Rosen
and I
didn't.
gotta say, Chuck Fletcher kind of got us, I think, expecting that when he made the comment after the season about
Yeah.
needing high-end talent.
Hmm.
And he had already gotten Tony DeAngelo. And Tony DeAngelo, make no mistake about it, is high-end
No,
talent.
he is. I agree.
The people here,
100% agree there.
putting the off-ice things aside, and I'm not saying it should be put aside. I'm just saying, talking about just Tony DeAngelo on the ice and what he's going to do for the Flyers. I think people that haven't watched him are going to be pleasantly surprised. He's a dynamic offensive defenseman. He will cough the puck up once in a while. trying for the offensive play over making the safe play. Although John Tortorella worked with Zach Werenski, did great work with him in Columbus. Maybe he is able to help Tony in that area too. But the bottom line is Tony is a guy who can really, I think, help the power play. I think he can really help this team moving the puck up the ice. Great skater. And so he's high-end talent. Don't get me wrong. But I was thinking more maybe up front. And everyone knew that, Giroux had been traded. Gaudreau's kind of a Claude Giroux kind of player, probably better than Claude right now at this relative stages of their careers because he's 5 years younger. And, it just seemed like a fit for so many reasons. And so I think when Chuck said that, I think everyone jumped to that conclusion, including yours truly. And then it didn't happen. So there was a disappointment. But the bottom line is, if the Flyers got Johnny Gaudreau, or since they did not, should not be the difference between expecting a Stanley Cup and expecting a team to finish last. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau is a great player. He's a hell of a player. I love the guy. Not one player is not going to take a team from, Stanley Cup winner to bottom of the heap, which is where the expectations seem to go that day.
Right.
So it's somewhere in between, and we'll see how it all pans out. But I do think John Tortorella is going to have a positive impact on this team. I do think the team clearly has to stay healthy. I mean, they have to have Sean Couturier. They have to have Kevin Hayes playing as they can. If they can get Ryan Ellis, it would be at this point almost treating it like a bonus, but that would be huge. They've added D'Angelo, and they need the younger players to take a bigger bite out of the team. And if all that happens, this team will be competitive for a playoff spot.
No, for sure. I agree. I mean, I think realistically everything is just staying healthy. I mean, if they can stay healthy and they have everybody for most of the year, they should be okay. Kind of going back to what you said about Tortorella and Werenski, another guy that kind of did that in Columbus was Brad Shaw, who the Flyers now have. They get Shaw, he seems like he's one of the more respected coaches, assistant coaches in the league defensively. What did you kind of think of that hire? I feel like the PK, again, a lot of people forget this too. The penalty kill was actually pretty good last year throughout, I guess you could say probably up till December or so. And then obviously it fell off with most other things, but what did you kind of think of that hire, and also the Rocky Thompson hire for the power play? Because that obviously has to change for this season.
Yeah, I mean, I could have thrown special teams right into what I just said about that equation, but I'm kind of assuming if D'Angelo has a positive impact and the younger players take a bigger bite and Sean Couturier and all these guys are healthy, that their special teams will be better.
Yeah.
But without question, they have to have better special teams. And if you just give the team last year, even as beat up as they were, mediocre special teams, let's say their power play and penalty kill finished 15th or 16th, as opposed to down right near the bottom and at the bottom, that team wins many more games because the Flyers were within one goal in the third period of something like 82% of their games last year. So they were in a lot of games. They just couldn't quite get over the hump. They'd allow a bad goal at the wrong time, or they just couldn't score that goal to tie a game up in the third. You change that special team and you have an extra power play goal a game, or one less power play goal against scored on you per game, and all of a sudden you're winning those games. So absolutely, those are key. And Brad Shaw comes with a very extensive and impressive resume. Rocky Thompson, not as detailed, but what he's done in shorter period of time has been impressive. I don't think when we saw Rocky Thompson as a player, we thought he'd be a power play specialist, but as a coach, he certainly seems to have had some good ideas. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. I mean, in terms of penalty kill, usually it's goaltending and hard work, but we'll see what Bradshaw can do with that. And then the power play, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go with that. The Flyers, of course, for so long have been driven from the hash mark with G. That's going to change. I think Tony's going to run the power play, but we'll see. Maybe they have a different setup. Maybe they work it from behind the net. They have some good net front presence, guys. So I can't wait to see as we get going here in training camp and then into the season what Rocky tries to do with the power play. It can't be worse than it was last year. It really can't. Yeah. But they have to get it, they have to climb significantly in that area to be competitive. No question about it.
No, for sure. I mean, again, they have a lot of options, and you have your younger guys in Frost and Cates, and even if they were to put Cates in the power play, they could. Obviously, you still have the situation with JVR. I mean, pretty much every defenseman they have outside of Braun could probably quarterback the power play. I mean, if you wanted, they could do the two defenseman unit. So there's so many different avenues they could kind of take with that. As for as for the penalty kill, you talked about goaltending a little bit. You hinted on that. Are you sold on Sandstrom yet? Because I kind of look at Sandstrom as, again, he only played 5 games, went 0-4-1. He had that one rough game against Winnipeg last year. Outside of that, he played well, but they didn't play good in front of him. I'm personally not really sold on him because, again, for just the team alone this year, they're banking on a lot, whether it's injuries or younger players stepping up. And then you have Sandstrom, who has to at least come in and play probably maybe 20, 25, 30 games bearing on injury. Hopefully nobody gets hurt, knock on wood. But going off that, are you sold on Sandstrom yet or no?
No, I'm not sold on Carter Hart. I mean,
Yeah.
I use goaltenders on a year-to-year basis. It's kind of
Mhm.
become like kickers. It's kind of become like closers in baseball, kickers in football. That you can't really, you just don't know what you're getting year to year with goalies. I'm a huge Carter Hart supporter. So when I say I'm not sold on him, I don't mean I'm not sold on him as a hockey player, but
Right.
I want to see Carter Hart 22, 23. I don't know what that's going to be. I really actually have extremely high hopes for Carter. If he can stay healthy, playing in a system that has structure to it, that is so about protecting the house, blocking shots, all that, I think he could take off this year. I really do. And I think Carter is probably determined to do that. As for Sandstrom, no way am I sold on a guy who's only played 5 games at the
Right.
NHL level. I do think he deserves a shot, and I think he's going to get that shot in training camp. Grosnick is probably going to be the backup, at least if everything's kind of even in training camp. But if Sandstrom comes in here and has a great camp, I think he can earn that reserve spot. And he has one more game experience in the NHL than Grosnick. So
Mhm.
the only thing is Grosnick has more experience, obviously, as a professional and played extremely well last year in the AHL. But I mean, I do think we're looking at a shot at it for Sandstrom. Samuel Erson's a guy you want to watch too. He's not ready yet, but finally healthy apparently. I was pretty high on him just a year ago. So they have some depth there. I'd like to have a more experienced guy somewhere along the line. There are those guys that are out there that they can probably acquire. Certainly, if Carter Hart goes down with an injury, knock on wood, but if he does, they're going to have to. And the Fedotov was obviously going to be part of the equation as well, and that got derailed by something completely out of hockey. So you can see a little bit why they're in that predicament. But if Carter goes down, I would think they're going to have to go out and get a guy that's got some NHL games under his belt. So we'll see. But Sandstrom, I think he'll get a shot to at least be the backup.
No, for sure. I agree. I mean, realistically, they don't really have any cap space. I mean, I think that right now they're 49 and 50 contracts, so they'd have to do a couple moves to at least try to get some other goaltender in here. But Jim, I got one last question for you. It's kind of more of a personal question. If you had to go over the years of your whole career, is there any one moment or one, whether it's a goal, a save, hit, anything like that, that you could maybe pick that say that's your favorite, or no, is it just too hard?
Uh, I'm asked this a lot,
Yeah.
and I, for many years, went with the not surprising choice of Keith Primo's goal in 2000 because it ended the longest game still
Yeah.
in the modern history of the NHL. I mean, since forward passing was allowed. So and that was still clearly one of them. There were two moments from the 2010 season that were amazing. The shootout, obviously, with Bush making the save, and the game 7 against Boston
Yeah.
when they completed the comeback from 3-0 down, both in the series and in that game. And then there's the Roenick goal against Toronto in 04, where he put them on to the conference finals after Sammy Kapanen scrambled back to the bench. Those are the four that come right rushing to my mind. And I
Okay.
now have done enough of these that's what I say all the time. But Chris, to be honest with you, and I don't mean this to be trite, when my feet hit the ground in the morning, when my feet hit the ground the morning of the 24th, which is just a week and a day away, I will be happier than anything because that means I'm doing a game. It's a preseason
Right.
game, but it's a game. And whenever I have a game to do that night, that day is a good day. There are so many moments throughout my career of Claude Giroux gave me a whole bunch all by himself.
Yeah.
Peter Forsberg in a very limited time. Eric Lindros gave me a ton. John LeClaire, Eric Desjardins, Kimmo Timonen. I mean, I can go right down the list. There's so many great players, so many great moments, great fights.
Yeah.
Ty Domi in the penalty box moments too. I
Yeah.
mean, there's all kinds of them. So it's very hard to pick one.
Right.
But those four probably because they were in momentous occasions. They were all in the playoffs and they're probably, well, one wasn't the playoffs, but the shootout to get into the playoffs. It's all those, but really every game. That's what I love about my job. Every game there could be another one, and we hope for that. And I hope this year we have some really good moments with this team, because I think they're going to be more competitive. I think Tortorella is going to make a lot of these games be closer. There might be more low scoring, but I think they'll be closer. And close games make for better moments.
That's a great answer. I love it. Jim, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. Again, good luck this year. Best luck with everything, and I'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure, Chris. See you at the rink, and JimJacksonBroadcasting.com for all those that want to do some broadcast coaching or cameo or voiceovers or any of that. I just revamped that website, so I got to throw that out there.
Nice. Oh, yeah, that's fine. No problem.
Take care.